Welcome. In this e-learning module, I shall demonstrate and make you understand how to design the stroke end blocks in Catia V5. Up until now, we have almost designed the press tool, including the guide pillar and the guide bush. Once the parts of the press tool are manufactured, all the die assembly parts are assembled to make the die assembly. All the punch assembly parts are assembled to make the punch assembly. Then the punch assembly is inserted into the die assembly. The guide bushes on the punch assembly are inserted into the guide pillars on the die assembly. There should be some stopper to indicate the bottom dead center. These stoppers are called stroke end blocks. The stroke end block is mounted on a die shoe. The diameter of the stroke end block is generally 30 mm to 50 mm. The stroke end block's length is the distance between the top surface of the die shoe and the top plate's bottom surface at the bottom dead center. Measure the distance between the top surface of the die shoe and the top plate's bottom surface. The measured distance is 140 mm. Let's design the stroke end block of dia 30 mm and length 140 mm. Create a new part file with the part name as stroke end block. Create a position sketch on the top XY plane. Sketch a circle of dia 30 mm. Make sure the sketch is fully constrained and exit the sketcher workbench. Create a pad of length 140 mm. Create a counterbore hole at the center of the top surface of the stroke end block. Select the hole extension as up to last. Select the hole type as counterbore. Select the hole standard as metric cap screws and M10 normal. Click on Preview, make sure the counterbore hole is getting created. Change the hole standard from metric cap screws to no standard. Change the counterbore depth to 25 mm. Click on OK. Swap the window to the press tool assembly. As we need a long screw, let's check the availability of the long screw. Click on the catalog browser. Observe there are standard parts in the catalog browser. Double-click on screws. Double-click on hexagon socket-headed cap screw. Search for the M10 screw and check for the maximum length available. The maximum length available is 100 mm. Close the catalog browser. Swap the window to the stroke end block. Edit the counterbore hole's depth. (140 mm minus 100 mm minus 20 mm). 140 mm is the length of the stroke end block. 100 mm is the length of the screw. And 20 mm is the thread engagement between the screw and the die shoe. Provide a chamfer of 1 by 45 degrees to the top edge of the stroke end block. Swap the window to the die assembly. Let's create the holes for mounting the stroke end blocks. Right-click on the die shoe and open it in the new window. Create a position sketch on the top surface of the die shoe. As we are designing the press tool for manual operation, let's position the stroke end blocks at the rear side of the press tool so that the stroke end blocks won't obstruct the operator. Create 2 points. Apply the symmetry constraint between the 2 points with reference to the vertical axis. Provide necessary dimensions. Make sure the sketch is fully constrained and exit the Sketcher workbench. Pick one of the points in the top surface of the die shoe. Create a simple threaded hole of size M10 with thick pitch and thread depth 25 mm and hole depth up to last. Apply a user pattern to the threaded holes by selecting the 2 points sketched earlier as the holes position. Swap the window to the press tool assembly. Now let's assemble the stroke end blocks. Click on the existing component command. Pick the die assembly. Pick the stroke end block from the file selection window. Observe the stroke end block is not available in the file selection window. The stroke end block is not yet saved. Swap the window to the stroke end block. Save the stroke end block. Swap the window to the die assembly. Click on the existing component command. Pick the die assembly. Pick the stroke end block from the file selection window. Use the manipulation command and drag the stroke end block. Provide a coincidence constraint between the stroke end block's axis and the threaded holes axis on the die shoe. Provide a contact constraint between the stroke end block's bottom surface and the die shoe's top surface. Update the assembly. Now let's assemble the second stroke end block. Pick the stroke end block on the product structure and pick the Reuse Pattern command. Pick the user pattern of the threaded holes on the die shoe. Observe the second stroke end block is assembled. Pick OK on the Reuse Pattern window. Click on the catalog browser. Search and double-click on the M10 screw with 100 mm length. Click on OK. Close the catalog browser. Observe hexagon socket-headed cap screws inserted into the assembly. Use the manipulation command and drag the screw. Provide a coincidence constraint between the axis of the screw and the axis of the counterbore hole. Provide a contact constraint between the screw head's bottom surface and the step of the counterbore hole. Update the assembly. Now let's assemble the other screw for the second stroke end block. Copy hexagon socket-headed cap screw. Right-click on the die assembly and paste the hexagon socket-headed cap screw. The pasted hexagon socket-headed cap screw is positioned precisely on the earlier screw. Use the manipulation command and drag both the screws. Update the assembly. Observe the first screw return to the original position due to the constraints provided. Provide a coincidence constraint between the axis of the screw and the axis of the counterbore hole. Provide a contact constraint between the step of the counterbore hole and the screw head's bottom surface. Update the assembly. Pick the sectioning command. Pick volume cut on the Result tab. Observe the assembly of the stroke end blocks and the screws. Observe, we have made a mistake in calculating the depth of the counterbore. Measure the distance between the top surface of the die shoe and the bottom edge of the screw. The measured distance is 20 mm. Swap the window to the stroke end block. Update the depth of the counterbore. Add 20 mm, which is the gap between the top surface of the die shoe and the bottom edge of the screw. Additional 20 mm towards the thread engagement, between the screw and the threaded hole on the die shoe. Swap the window to the die assembly. Update the assembly. Observe the assembly of the stroke end blocks, and the screws are correct. Delete the section from the product structure. Set the view to isometric and fit all in. Click on File, Save All, to save all the modified files in session. Observe the catalog parts that need to be saved. Pick the catalog parts and click on Save As. Make sure the file is getting saved in the project folder. Click Save. With this, we have successfully designed and assembled the stroke end blocks in Catia v5. That's all in this e-learning module. Thanks.